Hey everybody, Johnny here. Let's go see our favorite social distancing friend, Steve Hayes, tired old queen at the movies.
Oh, Johnny, come on. Johnny, we hadn't done an action-adventure movie in a while, so I thought, why not do a war movie and an Errol Flynn movie? So I chose 1943's Northern Pursuit, directed by Raoul Walsh and starring Errol Flynn, Julie Bishop, Gene Lockhart, John Ridgely, and my favorite cinema Nazi at the time, Helmut Dantine. Errol Flynn had been typecast as swashbucklers, and he'd been doing swashbucklers forever, and they made a lot of money for Warner Brothers, there was no question. But he really wanted to do something for the war effort. Now, the problem with Flynn being in the war was that he was a mess.
Sorry, it was a slip of the tongue. I don't believe it was.
He had an old case of TB that he never got over. He'd had multiple cases of venereal disease. He had heart condition, so he was completely non-eligible, and the studio kept it quiet because they didn't want the public to know what a mess physically he really was.
I'm exactly what I seem to be.
All right, let's look at it that way.
So to do his bit, he made as many war propaganda movies as he possibly could. Edge of Darkness, which was about the problem of Nazis in Norway and the resistance to battle them. Objective Burma. Many of these were directed by either Raoul Walsh or Michael Curtiz. This one was directed by Raoul Walsh, who was a real man's man director. And he had started out as an actor in silent movies. He was John Wilkes Booth in D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation. He later transposed into directing. He lost an eye at one point, so he always had a patch over his eye. This is one of my favorite war movies of the period because it was so unusual. It takes place in Canada. At the beginning of the movie, a Nazi submarine rises in Hudson's Bay through the ice and lets off this group of Nazis, and they're all led by handsome Austrian actor, well, he's got stuck playing Nazis, Helmut Dantine. We'd seen him earlier as the Nazi that Mrs. Miniver encounters in her kitchen, and Mrs. Miniver, he's the down pilot. They're on skis, trying to make their way someplace. We're not quite sure what they're up to, but they're in Canada. And they don't know the terrain well enough, and an avalanche comes, which is so exciting. And wipes them all off, and of course Helmut Dantine, being the way he is, pushes the other guys in front of the snow so he can get away, you know. As Daffy Duck would say, he was despicable, and it was established really, really early. He makes his way along the tundra on skis alone, and finally he just collapses and he's dying of frostbite. Well, he's discovered by two mounted police officers, Errol Flynn and John Ridgely, and they take him back, and he comes to, and John Ridgely goes, oh my God, he's a Nazi, what's he doing here?
A German officer up here in the North Country. I don't get it.
And Errol Flynn starts to interrogate him, and he finds out that Errol Flynn is of German descent, and he goes, so how do you feel about that?
A lot of people in Canada are German descent. Yeah.
So he says to John Ridgely, go back and tell him that we've taken this prisoner and I'm going to bring him in. Well, they're very suspicious back at headquarters about this because he's kind of got the reputation of being a renegade. So when he brings the Nazi guy in, they interrogate him like crazy. Why did it take you so long to bring him in? What were you doing? Were you in cahoots with this guy?
What do you seem to me? To me, you seem to be
Disloyal.
So they take Helmut Dantine to a prison camp, and he gets together with a bunch of other Nazis, and they make a successful escape. Once that happens, they pull Errol Flynn in and they say, now look, we want you to go undercover. We want you to go out and try to find him, try to intercept this guy, and find out what's going on and what they're up to. This enemy agent, played by Gene Lockhart, who was the judge in Miracle on 34th Street, the fumbling judge. He was the father of June Lockhart, who was on Lost in Space. This kind of a portly guy, very funny. But in this one, he plays this American guy who's a spy for the Nazis. And he intercepts Errol Flynn and propositions him and says, well, we heard that you brought him in, and we know you're of German descent.
I think I can use you,
That's more like the real reason, isn't it?
if you prefer to think so.
And Flynn says, why not? I don't care about Canada. I'd be glad to do it. So they make their way and they find Helmut Dantine and his men. And they proceed to making their way across the tundra. This is where all the action takes place. There are amazing scenes of skiing and dog sleds, and it's just brilliantly shot. They get to a mine, a deserted mine in the tundra. And inside this mine are stored boxes upon boxes upon boxes. And over for the last 10 years before the Germans came to power, they have been sending this stuff to Canada, and it's to build a bomber. They're going to bomb all of the waterways along the St. Lawrence Seaway. That's their plan, to stop any sort of supplies, war supplies, from coming in and out in that area, and gradually to establish themselves in Canada and infiltrate their way in. So they make Errol Flynn help them build this bomber.
Say, have you ever flown a bomber? No. That's too bad. You have missed a great thrill.
Now, along the way, Flynn has been engaged to this girl. She's one of those precocious heroines who always has her nose and everything, you know, and she follows him in, and they take her prisoner to make sure that Errol behaves himself, you know.
Steve!
Laura.
They finally sent her back because Flynn says, I won't help you. I know you're going to kill her, so you either send her back now or you don't get my help, and you can't do this without me. I'm the only one who knows how to get you out of here.
How can I be sure of that?
You can't. That's a chance you've got to take.
So they send her back, and then it's up to Flynn against 6 of these Nazis to try to stop him from doing this. And the action builds up to this climax that is just so Warner Brothers. It's so implausible, but it works. It's just great old-fashioned melodrama. I just love studio productions like this because they're so interesting with what they could do. Errol Flynn today would have been looked at, as much as a big hero he would have been looked at so differently today. During the production of this movie, he was cleared of statutory rape charges. This was not the first time that this happened. The studio wanted to keep that as quiet as possible, but of course the press got a hold of it and it was all over the papers, and they just kind of low played it. He was continually being blackmailed for this, you know, letters would come and I saw you with this woman, or I saw you with this man, or I saw you with this, you know, because Flynn didn't really care. He was a good time boy. But the funny thing is, at the end of this movie, the last line of this movie, he holds the girl, his girlfriend, Julie Bishop, and it's their wedding, and she says, "Oh, Steve, am I the only woman you've ever loved?" And he says, "Yes, you're the only woman I've ever loved." And he kissed her, and he looks in the camera, and he goes,
What am I saying?
and this came out just as that verdict came through, and audiences across America burst into applause and laughter. These days, it would have been... But at this particular juncture, there was nobody more fun or more charmingly affable, and at the same time, really great with the action sequences than Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, Julie Bishop, Gene Lockhart, and Helmut Dantine in Raoul Walsh's exciting war drama, Northern Pursuit.
Let's all go to the lobby.
That would be really too bad, wouldn't it? That would be really too bad, wouldn't it? And it's Gail Sondergaard. Sooner or later, they all turn into Gail Sondergaard.